Welcome everyone to the second episode of Lightning Talks with Tech Leaders. Today we're joined by Dario, whose career over the last 10 years has spanned startups, scale-ups and giants within the technical industry. From his early days, Dario directed the CI/CD delivery process for Vodafone's GigaTV, which was a groundbreaking project that reduced development cycles from 6 months to just 2 weeks. And this achievement involved orchestrating the efforts of around 300 developers across multiple countries. His journey didn't stop there. Dario went on to lead the global department at Allianz, pioneering internal SaaS solutions that brought innovation to their teams worldwide. And then he embarked on a journey founding MindDoc, which was actually Germany's first digital mental health platform. And with Dario's leadership, they scaled the team to around 80 individuals and even regulated AI technology that predicted depression and anxiety. Dario's journey continued as he led the engineering departments for a business called parcelLab, following a period of hyper-growth at the company. Dario is currently the founding technology lead at Karla, or Go Karla GmbH, which is a post-purchase experience company that provides a very seamless experience for consumers. So without further ado, Dario, welcome to the talk.
Hi, Paul. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So hopefully I've done quite a good job in introducing you, but for everyone listening, please give us a bit more of a detailed overview of your career journey so far and the things along the way that have helped shape your journey.
So mainly, as I consider myself a technical person, and I still develop, and I hope that will stay like that for a long time. The critical point for me was to discover if I wanted to focus more on being an enabler, or if I wanted to continue being a builder, which is also a technology growth path that it has a great prospect if you want to grow only and you don't want to be involved with people and processes so much. So I actually, during my career, when you start to take more responsibility and to take bigger scopes and to take more ownership that is more widely spread in the company in which you are, I basically noticed that I really enjoyed working with people. It's challenging, it's unpredictable, but I really had more joy in making things faster than in being faster myself. I actually noticed that I found more challenges in basically enabling these teams than in delivering as an individual contributor or even as a senior contributor, basically. So that was, for me, an influx point in my career.
So what was it like taking that transition, going from the individual contributor to more of an enabler?
It was very challenging at the beginning because when you are used to do things fast or you have your own, I would say, you will see yourself as somebody being very fast at delivering stuff, that it doesn't have to be at the actual case, but this is something that in development we always think about ourselves. Basically, when you are onboarding people to our code base that they are not used to working, and that's actually by default, they are going to be slower. Like to actually let that feeling go in which, hey, if I do it myself, it's going to take me 5 minutes, but I need to invest time on basically onboarding these people so that they will actually get that ownership. And I don't really trust if they are really going to do it by themselves. So it's this kind of feeling. I had it. It took me a while to get out of it, and I'm not going to lie, sometimes I still have that. But once you see that you can scale this, that all the time that you invested in helping these people to grow or to be onboarded in a code base or in a technology or in a different part of the company, doesn't have to be only in technology, and that they can do it independently, and that they are also contributing and making things better on their own. That's basically where, once you experience that, you know that it's worth the pain, and in which, oh, maybe I should stop doing it in 5 minutes, and I actually need to take the opportunity to onboard these engineers.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as a leader, it is so hard to let go. I think, you know, once you're very skilled at something, it's quite easy to want to step in and do things, right? I've learned that as well. When was that point for you? So when did you actually become more of an enabler?
Actually, I had, during my career, I had sometimes the feeling, why am I basically, you know, when I had this feeling when I was a team lead or tech lead. I mean, there are different ways of naming this, either officially or unofficially. Like, why do I keep trying so hard? In some cases, you invest a lot of energy and it doesn't always pay off. Sometimes that's what I mean with people that is unpredictable. You can have a high reward and also develop relationships that are going to last for a long, long time, or the other way around. Like it could be exactly, and it's also okay. It's out of our control. So I actually had this kind of enabler check, or because, you know, tech leadership can also be done from a more purely technical point of view. I think it's a different way of leading. I still think that there is always the need to have a leader more focused on people who has a technical background, because there are not many of them in the market. So I noticed that, hey, I actually enjoyed the part of the people. I think that I can keep myself connected to technology. I think that I can also contribute from a technical perspective. It's kind of like I've thought that I enjoy filling the gaps, and that is very important to have somebody who is filling the gaps. Especially, you know, even in a small company, definitely, but this also is something that you can do when there is a big company as well. I mean, I could fill the gaps also in big corporations too, not only from a people perspective. And that's actually one thing that I noticed, that the technology market was lacking. And I was always attracted with the fact in which the challenge to basically achieve a win-win from a business perspective about delivering stuff, and also about basically aligning the incentives from the engineers towards the incentives that the business has in being more profitable. So in that regard, all those dynamics that are not necessarily technical were very attractive for me and the real challenge for me. So when I had this reality check, I always thought, oh, actually, I think I should stay myself in this area, because not only is very challenging, very rewarding in that regard, also because I basically felt that filling those gaps was what was the real motivator for me, because I can basically keep myself not only technical, also basically to keep myself connected to the people side when managing technical teams.
Definitely becoming that bridge between the technical and the business side of things is critical, for sure. So how best do you think you might maybe describe your leadership style, and what are the things that maybe you've learned along the way that you feel are now kind of good practices for you, or bad practices?
Yeah, in general, because the leadership style, I think that regarding bridging this gap between the business and engineering, I always aim to set up either processes or to set up a culture in which the incentives are going to be aligned. Because I think that one of the main problems I've seen in my career is like typical question: engineering is slow. It always happens. It happened to me. Like I've seen it in startups, in big corporations, scale ups. Engineering is slow, which is basically, I think that is because sometimes engineering might be a black box. but also because there is the need to define these incentives in a clear way. For instance, I mean, in a startup, you basically can incentivize your employees just giving equity.
Right.
So, which is cool because, you know, once you give equity to somebody, you don't need to do much management because they are already vested. But if they see in the market that if they go to another company and then get a 30% increase, I mean, what kind of incentive they have to stay in the company while they are not learning? Because they can actually go somewhere else. So actually there is a problem that is the incentive for learning something and basically or growing themselves or improving their employability in the future, which is basically a personal incentive, but that's where we can actually see an alignment. So my management style, especially at a bigger scope, is to align the incentive from the engineer individually to the incentive that the engineer has in working within a team to deliver the business goals. And also basically how can we link those business goals with the fact that an engineer is going to deliver in value while is also going to be incentivized towards, if there is no equity, basically from a salary perspective, there has to be something else. That is, what is the engineer learning? How is the engineer basically going to improve the employability? And that's the real challenge, especially in a bigger organization. So mainly to be able to link that, that's where I actually go into the goals area. How can we basically set goals that are going to align what the business wants and what the engineer wants? Mm-hmm. And that's basically where I enter in the part in which I differentiate business goals from personal goals. So basically, like the leadership style, even in a small company, is very much related to use goals to basically bridge the gap between the incentives that a business has and the employee has.
Yeah, so bring in aligning everyone with the same kind of vision and you know, making sure that everyone's on or very clear with that roadmap from an employee business point of view. Cool. Okay, cool. So I guess moving away from that, I mean, we talk about technology and the tech landscape is evolving at an incredible pace. You know, with trends such as AI, machine learning, cloud computing, cybersecurity, and blockchain taking a very center stage. As a leader yourself, Dario, I mean, how do you perceive these trends shaping the industry? And more importantly, how do you kind of leverage them in your role?
So, well, currently we have the artificial intelligence hype, which is now coming to a more realistic point of view. But I mean, from time to time, I've seen these kind of hype cycles. I remember, for instance, the big data hype with Hadoop and big data everywhere. Machine learning also, like some time ago, was also there. So now it's like coming back again, but with a different name. Blockchain, as you mentioned, was a very interesting one. If you take a look at all these trends and at the technology, you basically see a few patterns. One is not new. So I remember when big data was a trend. I mean, big companies were doing big data for a long time. And it's like, well, big companies. Or I don't know, Kubernetes, for instance, has been a trend very recently. Big companies were also working with Kubernetes even earlier than other small companies that are in general faster. Machine learning or all the AI concepts are something that was defined in the 70s, even in the 50s as a concept. Now we are actually seeing that they are being implemented and that they are going mainstream. So there is something interesting about that. So the fact that it's going mainstream, that they are a bit overhyped, but it has a positive side that means that now the public is actually seeing the benefit of this. So that means that now cloud providers are putting a lot of effort to make these concepts more available to everybody. So for instance, it will be very difficult for any of us to run an LLM a few years ago. Now there are a lot of different offerings there. Even you can run it open source in your computer. I mean, it might require a big machine, but you actually can create a startup out of this. And now we see all these startups booming, which I think is good for the community, because now I think that as a society we are advancing. So we are democratizing all these concepts in a way in which, thanks to this hype, we will be able to develop better solutions for our users, which is good. But I mean, I can apply all of this to all the hype cycles. For instance, blockchain. It's a technology that I find fascinating. But if you take a look at the origin of that technology, you will see that it's actually evolving from a way in which we manage emails. So, like, if you take a look at different algorithms, it would be basically how all this engineering concept was actually related to emails. So the proof of stake, the proof of not the proof of stake, the proof of work. That actually would be one. That would be that was the evolution basically. So but however, this was giving up giving new solutions to engineers to basically develop services that would be distributed and that wouldn't be relying on a server, which is also good. So in general, with all these concepts, I think that they are here to help us. If we go specifically to artificial intelligence, we need to take them with care because they are not solving all our problems. And sometimes I think the important thing is that we shouldn't find problems to solve with these technologies. It's actually the other way around. So the problem with the hype is that because we want to use AI, we will actually try to find a problem so that we can use AI to solve it. When it's no, we need to find a problem that our users have and then analyze in the best way if we should use these technologies to solve them. So yeah, that's basically my take. But I think that in general, when I see a hype cycle, sometimes I like, oh, here we go again. But on the other hand, I actually think that this is evolution and I really enjoy it because it forces me to evolve. So yeah, I personally enjoy the hype a lot.
So do you think any of these trends have kind of impacted any of your strategies or your decisions?
Yeah, definitely. In some cases, it was more a distraction than anything else. I remember when the blockchain was hot, I was actually working in healthcare and I don't know how many times I heard, hey, we should go to blockchain, whatever. And I was all the time challenging, like, why? I mean, why do we need to? I didn't find a use case. So in general, yeah, basically with these things regarding strategy, we need to be very careful. It's basically what I mentioned about not trying to find a problem for this. But regarding the big data trend, I remember that being able to use these technologies actually helped us to use some to fix some problems that we had at the startup level. So it does really doesn't have to necessarily impact the strategy, but it definitely forces you to revisit the strategy. And I think the best example would be the cloud technology. That definitely, some cases was a bit annoying, but like we had AWS and maybe Microsoft, because Microsoft did it in a very smart way with Azure. They were leveraging their contracts with a lot of big companies. And, I had to revisit, hey, maybe we should go to Azure because there is a pricing advantage. That could be one example. Or some cloud offerings. Sometimes there are multi-cloud discussions because maybe one cloud is not able to provide this. So definitely this constantly opens a discussion from a strategy point of view. And artificial intelligence is not different. So it also definitely is a technology that we evaluate very closely if it can help us in our roadmap.
Sure, yeah. So just taking things with a pinch of salt and assessing really whether or not they have the business case in your scenario to benefit the business or the team, which I think is a fair assumption. And yeah, I think always it's a good idea to tread carefully, right? And just to see how these things develop before, going all in sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right. So as a tech leader with kind of experiencing both team management and scaling, tell us, Dario, how have you kind of built effective teams in the past, kind of fostered innovation and promoted a positive work culture?
So I think that the first unit to address in this regard is the team in an isolated way. So basically, every team will have kind of their own culture, and it has to somehow reflect the overall culture from the company. But in some cases, every team is going to be different in some ways. And sometimes in the way in which they work, or in the way in which they structure their own synchronous and asynchronous meetings. And this is basically something that has to basically handle first. How can they set themselves up for continuous improvement? Because I think that's the important thing always, to, especially in software, to have a culture in which you can continuously challenge what you have, but in a way in which you don't lose track of the business goals. And setting up that balance is something that starts within each team. And then, because that's basically like, imagine that we have multiple teams in which they have fair way of setting up that balance between, hey, this is what we deliver, and hey, this is how we control that we don't need to, that we are not going to be flooded with maintenance work, and that we can actually improve the way in which we work together. So once there is a balance between that in each team, actually there is the challenge. How can we put all these things together, or how can we align those teams towards achieving something greater? And that's basically related to the goals discussion, because the alignment there is super important, because the teams might be competing with each other. And you could easily see the case in which there is a startup of startups or a big company of startups. And while that has some benefits, because that means that the teams might be all of them great startups within the company, and they might be very, very performant. Even if the teams are optimized, if they are competing with each other and they are basically delivering stuff that is not strategically aligned to what the company needs, it doesn't matter how good the teams are. So that's actually the part in which, especially at scale, we need to align and be very clear about the company goals, what the company needs. And the bigger the company, the more difficult it is, because then you actually need to go through different layers. Different layers could be like, C-level, there is a company-wide, then you go to maybe to a VP level or director, depends on the company. Every company has a different name for this. That is maybe a department-wide, it could be global, in super big companies, global department or European department or whatever. And then you actually go and go subset as a set of teams. And that's the challenge, to have all the teams aligned to what the company needs. And in that regard, basically, one of the things would be, how are the teams going to be incentivized so that they don't compete with each other? Because if we don't set these goals that are going to be cross-team or are going to be beyond the dimension of the team, they are going to compete with each other, and they don't have the incentive to stop competing with each other. And that's actually the part in which I think that the figure of a manager of some sort makes sense. Personally, in the technology side, I think that a manager should have an engineering background, or should at least be able and be very close to what the team is developing, that are going to dedicate time to basically make sure that their team or teams are basically going to focus on the things that matter, and to basically make easy for the individual contributors the things in which they need to work on, and to avoid that frustration in which they will deliver something that is never going to be released, or that is not important to be released. And that's basically the part that I think is super important when we are scaling an organization. That engineering manager, as I call it, there are many names for this and many flavors. That engineering manager figure is super important, because when we are in a startup, we have a lot of managers of one, because also it's very easy to incentivize them. But once the startup grows, we are at some point not going to, well, in some cases, maybe the equity is transformed into RSUs, but that's a public company already. But in general, it's more difficult to incentivize the company with a bigger stake. So to incentivize the employees with a bigger stake. So basically, that's why that managerial one is more difficult to achieve when the organization is growing. And that's one of the keys towards scaling an organization, especially a software organization.
Yeah, definitely. Some great insights there for sure. And I guess as well, that kind of follows on to building that team, right? So, as you know, I'm in recruitment. That's what I do day in, day out. But what's your approach to recruitment, and what kind of things have you adopted to, make sure that you recruit the right people for your business?
So I actually follow some rules that I think that are, for me, like small, like the law in recruitment. One is that interviews are bi-directional. So it's not only the company interviewing the engineer, it's also the other way around. Right. Especially with engineers. I mean, I'm more focused on engineers, so I don't enter in different areas, in different profiles. But in this case, I think that one is key. So the engineers should also have the feeling that they are interviewing the company. They should actually interview the companies too. Otherwise, they might get frustrated when they jump into another company and maybe it's not the best fit for them. And the other rule that I have is that I think that the steps should be flexible to each candidate. This is not something that you can always achieve. So you go to the big tech, you will see that it's kind of like you are preparing, like you go to a public company, basically as a public worker, you need to study for 1-2 years in some cases to pass all the tests, a lot of computer science questions that are standardized. I mean, I think that if you have the chance in which you can flexibilize your interview process, you are going to reap the benefits, because at the end, the important thing is the first screening. So we have a lot of profiles coming. Based on that, and this is challenging because I usually try to train somebody that doesn't necessarily have to be technical, but that they like to screen technical profiles because they can help a lot. And they can basically take a look at the different technologies, and sometimes they learn and they do a good job at identifying if somebody could be a good cultural fit. And they don't need to be engineers to more or less notice this. That once you have the first screening, basically, I think that it's important to investigate the candidate with the material that is publicly available, for instance, open source contributions, because that would really impact the technical assessment that you can do for this employee. Why engineer? Why would we want to repeat something that we can actually see that the engineer made publicly available? And we know that that engineer has already these skills. Why would we like to spend, the time from each other in a synchronous meeting when we can actually get that information asynchronous? And it's something that, doesn't require so much time to do. You can, in some cases, even kind of have some process that will make it super easy to check, hey, look, yeah, this candidate actually has a really good cultural technical check with us. So the technical step would be strongly influenced by the information that we can find available from the candidate in an asynchronous way. And then we have the screening, the technical check, and basically the screening is not something that we do synchronously with the candidate, but then we have one step that is the technical check. The other step would be the cultural check, which will be also another synchronous meeting. So something to check if the way in which this engineer has developed is something that is a good fit for the way in which the company is developing. For instance, game development, is a completely different beast than developing a web application or developing a mobile application or developing a backend. So, actually, to basically check for that will avoid a lot of frustration, both from the company and from the engineer. And that means that this is the other rule. only 3 steps, if possible, for individual contributors. The third step would be the team fit. So kind of a meet the team meeting. I mean, I usually like the screening, of course, is the first step. Doesn't have to happen in a meeting with the candidate. From the 2 initial steps, the culture check and the technical check, that can happen. I mean, you can exchange them, depends a bit on what you want to do and also on your logistics or availability from the different people. And the last one would basically be, hey, meet the team, meet your colleagues. The colleagues can also feel that they are involved and they have a vote in who is going to join the company. And also this kind of like a cultural check plus. So that's basically how I like to structure the recruitment processes, at least the process that gave me the best results, basically. And yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned about a vote at the end. Does that have to be a unanimous vote or is it majority vote?
That's a very good question, because I mean, and I know that in big tech, there is this kind of 100% approval rate if somebody is going to get an offer. Definitely, that we should always strive to an anonymous decision. But we have also hired candidates that didn't have an anonymous decision, and they were great employees. They were contributing a lot. So it's something that I think that more than in the 100% check, I think that is where we would be talking a bit more about what kind of gut feeling you have. And this is something that we can really measure, we can really explain, because we are entering an area of the human brain that at some point, maybe in a long time, we will be able to explain, but that we can't at the moment. That is basically what we call this gut feeling, or something that you basically see that you have a good feeling with this engineer. And I can say that when there was this feeling with a lot of people, especially the ones who interacted with the candidate, that's where we noticed that we made the best decisions. I wish I could explain that with more detail, but as I made, it's something that basically comes a bit with experience and also a bit with kind of the vibe that you have in the personal or remote conversation that you had with this candidate. And if this was replicated with different interviewers, with different hiring managers, then is something that is reducing the risk of having a bad hire.
Understood. Cool. All right. Appreciate the insights. So your career has been quite a remarkable journey filled with a lot of growth and learning, I feel. So maybe if you can, could you offer some advice for maybe some aspiring tech leaders that are chiming into this podcast, or maybe share some of the lessons that you've learned along the way in your leadership experience?
The first one is basically about discovering if you are a builder or an enabler. So kind of like if you really want to keep growing from a technical point of view, and not bother so much with processes or with basically what I mentioned about engineering manager at scale, and making sure that the teams have the focus so that they can work on what matters, and to bridge the business from, to bridge basically the business with the engine room. So, which is something that the architects also have to do, but I mean, like, not so focused on basically helping or managing from a process perspective how your reports can grow, or to find resources so that can basically grow within the company. Also to kind of focusing a bit more on the psychological part of engineering, and trying to fix also people problems and not technical problems. I mean, to discover all of this first, so that you will you know what kind of leader you want to be, because there are many different types of technical leadership. There is also a very valid technical leadership that is much more technology focused. At the end, I think that important thing in a company is that all of this is basically integrated properly, all these different profiles, but the important thing is to discover that first. Because if you are a very good individual contributor, if you enjoy being an individual contributor and you want to basically keep growing on that way and to inspire others, so from a technical point of view and not bother much about other people factors, it would be the bad call, the wrong call to move into more people-driven type of leadership. This will frustrate the leader and it will frustrate the report. So that will be the first word of advice. There are all other things like a bit related to what we discussed regarding the hype cycles. I think that it's important to keep challenging yourself. Technology is moving fast, and try to find a way to be in touch with technology, or you will be outdated very fast. Personally enjoy that. That's why I decided since I was very young to be in the tech market, because it's a place in which you will never stop learning. I find it very exciting. All the technologies that have been appeared in my life, and also to discover that what is behind the technologies is not as different as people think. That when you grasp the fundamentals and when you grasp all these patterns, they are repeating again and again, but with different names. And basically, that's one thing that I enjoy. And sometimes, there are new patterns coming, which are kind of an evolution of the patterns we already know, but that is very exciting to learn. So I think that this is very important as well for any leader, to always stay up to date with technology as much as possible. And well, this one personally also a bit of a cliche, the lead by example, but more than leading by example, which I think is very well known, once you have authority, when you are empowered, you actually, or I've seen basically from people in my network, talking with some friends, and there is the typical case in which you see that somebody is leading by fear, which is, in some cases, is a style of leadership that, I will never support, but I have to say that you can also lead by fear. I don't think it's so efficient. It's another style. And there are some benchmarks that I would run to see if your team is scared. One is if the team is silent. If the team is silent, it's either because they are scared or they are clueless, and none of them is a good good outcome. So that would be one of the first things to actually check, because it could be that maybe they are scared of you, or maybe sometimes once you are used to basically to be in this dynamic in which you are leading teams, sometimes you might be a bit imposing, and then it's important also to reflect on this fact. And another one that we addressed as well regarding bridging the gap is what I call learn how to talk CEO. I think this can be applied to the builder enablers, because I've met really good builders that were able to bring difficult technical topics that will be understood by C-level, by executives. So in that regard, I think that the only way to do that, to basically get better at talking CEO, is to keep talking to non-technical people. I wish I could actually bring a guide. We can always put some guidelines, etc., and try to be straight to the point, try to actually be, even if it sounds super stupid what you are saying, like try to simplify it to the maximum. Also try to read the room, to see if people are engaged to what you are saying, that they are basically looking at you, if they don't look bored. And then basically, like, even if they are not going to give you this feedback directly, you can actually feel this. And then you will iterate your speech based on what you see from the reactions from others, and keep doing it and keep trying. And at the beginning, it's difficult. And at the beginning, you will have feedback that you are too technical. You will have feedback that nobody understood you because this is like a lot of buzzwords. And then, you refine and again and again. And then you actually will see that that feedback that comes to you might be, hey, wow, how do you do this? How can you actually explain all these complex concepts in a way that looks so simple? And you might have the problem that you will need to just change your register to basically do not do this with engineers, because they will feel a bit insulted, like, hey, well, I mean, we know what you're talking about. Don't try to come there. And that's the thing. And that's basically the next challenge you will have. But then once you notice that problem, is like, hey, look, actually, I think that then you are basically able to change the way in which you explain all these topics. And this is extremely difficult. To me, I think I'm constantly learning this. And to me, it took me years. And it will take me a lot of it. And I don't know if it will ever stop to actually be able to basically connect or improve my connection with the audience. So that's actually one thing, that to take always this into consideration, and to basically see how in the baseline that you put to yourself about speaking CEO, how can you actually see that this is improving? And the other one is the last one. Actually, you are going to learn more from your failures than from your successes. The failures are going to humble you. Sometimes, I mean, especially when you are used to, because a leader has to be often right. In some cases, the bigger the scope, you can't have the privilege of being wrong often, or you are not going to last long. So in that regard, leaders are used to be right. So they usually have the risk, because they have been generally successful at any point in their careers due to different factors, but in general, they are usually very competent. So this could actually lead you to think that you know everything, that basically to have a big ego. And when there is a failure, this could actually be very disappointing, because you are used to fix everything, and you are used to keep things moving, and you had success in this point of your career, and this other, and wow, I'm here. I mean, and you actually need this, because you need to be confident on what you are doing. If you are not confident, you are not going to be able to have people following you. So in that regard, it's also important to, once you have a failure, there are two ways. Either like we put the failure under the rug, or you just basically like throw people under the bus, and then, well, fair enough. But also to reflect on that, and what can we do that is better, but to also see this as a lesson that you can't fix everything, even if you know, and that is very important to have a team not only supporting you, and to basically earn that trust is a lot of work that you also need to achieve, and be willing to put that effort, because you can't do this alone. And in some cases, even if you do it perfectly, even if you basically like ace the performance, sometimes the reward is not going to be reflecting that kind of effort that you put, and that kind of top performance that you put. So I think that that's basically one thing that for every leader, I think it might happen at some point in their careers, or several times, and to be ready for that and to learn from that.
Yeah, indeed. I think there's a lot of things there, isn't there? I mean, with leadership, it's communication is pivotal. Pivotal. I mean, as we know, and then feedback and reflection, and then I think adaptability is something that you've got to take on board as a leader, right? To like you say, figure out what worked, what didn't, and then go again. So some great pieces of advice there for sure.
Thanks.
So before we wrap up the conversation, Dario, I mean, that's very much on the tech side that we've jumped into. Let's kind of jump into some of the personal side a bit about you. So you've kind of shared a wealth of insights about your tech journey, but perhaps you can tell me about some of your kind of personal off-screen passions and what kind of things you're into.
Yeah. So I mean, during winter, I tried to improve my skills at snowboarding. So it was basically also a very humbling sport for me. I started a bit late. I live in Munich, so there are really great ski resorts not far away from here. And when I started in my 30s, I was really bad at skiing, and I was like, hey, let's give it a try to snowboarding. I mean, I did some board sports when I was a child, not really it looked like I was a fast learner. I was learning fast with them, and it was good. I mean, it was a lot of pain the first year. I went to the hospital once, which I thought I broke my back. I did, but it was not like, but recovered, and then basically learned from those mistakes. And I managed to be able to go with my friends and to enjoy with them, going to the ski resorts. And it's one passion that I wish I could practice more often. One that I do in summer, whenever I have the chance, is to basically go diving. I really enjoy, when I go to a few meters under the sea, I always try to do snorkel when I don't have the opportunity to go diving. But I actually find that I can see more life in 1 to 20 meters, really next to, not far away from land, than what I could actually see when I'm on the earth per se. I think that land is boring, but the sea is amazing because you just go there and you see so much life. So it's kind of an alien environment, and I really love that. I really love to basically be a mere spectator of the sea life, and that's one thing I really like. Another one, so this one is a bit more difficult, is when I have the chance to go with some friends who know how to sail. I really take that chance, and year after year I'm starting to be more comfortable helping them with the boat. And who knows, I mean, Munich is going to be a bit difficult, but in the future, if I have the opportunity and in summer to basically spend some days sailing with friends, something that I wish that I could set as a recurrent hobby. It doesn't have to be very expensive, because I don't really like the yachts. I like the sailing boat. So you need to work a lot. You need to basically like put the sail and take the advantage that the sea is going to provide to you sometimes. So that's basically a bit cheaper, especially because you don't need to go to a hotel or something. So well, that's good, because I don't really need to go to an upper tier, like to a yacht or a bigger boat. I don't really need to do all of that. So it will be, yeah, it's definitely one of the things that, for instance, I enjoyed most in this summer.
Brilliant. And how do those things, I mean, those things that you do in your spare time, how do they impact your work? And does it have a positive impact on you, going away and doing these things and coming back into work? And what's the kind of things that you feel are positives from doing these things outside of work?
It's definitely because I spent a lot of time with computers. I love computers, so I love them. I've worked remotely in the last 3-4 years, which is something that I like. If you have a strong sense of ownership, you will be more productive working remotely. Especially you are used to work asynchronously. I'm a person who likes to read a lot, to write a lot. So that's really a good cultural fit for remote working. But on the other hand, it's very easy to, when you are into this hyper-focus mode, to lose track of time and to overwork. So bit by bit, especially because in our, I think this could be applied to any sector, but in software engineering, you can always be busy, and if you are not busy, you can always find something that will keep you busy. There is always something to do, always something to improve, always something to release, always something new that could help our users. And that can actually, with this kind of hyper focus and also to seek for that satisfaction of delivering something, this could really put you in a place in which you could end up, I mean, either burn out or to feel a bit like you do it for a long time, you need to disconnect. And then these hobbies, when I can do something that is going to keep me engaged, that I'm going to enjoy, in general, a bit related to sports as well, doesn't have to be extreme sports or something, that is also going to connect myself with nature, to basically to help me to connect with nature, like, you know, it could be in the sea, in the mountains. I think that that really helps. I actually can see that I don't need so much time to disconnect. I don't need to take 1, 2, 3 months or something. That if I do this for 1 week, 2 weeks, I mean, if I, depends on the time in which I've been in that kind of zone. If I do it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I totally can disconnect from anything. So when I used to go travel far away from Germany into, I don't know, to Indonesia, I plan to go to Japan maybe next year. You know, these kind of 3 weeks trips as well, they help you to just forget about the computer. And once you come back, you actually feel that your cognitive abilities are better, even if you can do much more in less time. While when you don't have this kind of rest, you actually put more hours and more hours, and you actually can feel that sometimes you are not really so focused, or you might be doing mistakes that you are not usually doing, or even in the way in which you talk, that sometimes you are not feeling so fresh. That sometimes you actually have these days in which is like, hey, I mean, today I'm not really on the top of my game. So that's why I think that like linking these hobbies to my free time, also like to do it in company, you know, that's for definitely better. I think that really helps. So I think it's also important to take that into account when you are working in that way.
Definitely, yeah, definitely a reset and recharge away from a computer does work. I mean, funnily enough, I had my first summer holiday with the family, and it was the first time that I'd actually put the phone down. I didn't take my laptop, and you know what? I just ended up coming back so full of enthusiasm and recharged. Whereas before, I'd always kind of worked but not worked, if you know what I mean. So I do think that, yeah, it's so important, right?
Yeah, definitely, because it's basically that road into, I mean, I don't know how to call it, because also burnout is basically something that is definitely real. But I think that every person is going to deal with the stress in a different way. For you need to be aware of the symptoms that you personally have, and this is something that you actually will see with experience. So I think that once you start to see those symptoms very early, that's actually the part in which you need to
Book a holiday.
you don't need to completely stop, but you need to basically like, hey, look, putting more hours is not going to help you to achieve more.
Yeah.
So that's actually the part in which I think is important, and for sure the holidays help. Instead of working 14 hours per day, feeling like, hey, look, maybe we need to cut it down. So this kind of stuff, basically, yeah.
Indeed. Cool. Well, look, as we wrap up this engaging episode of Lightning Talks with Tech Leaders, a big thank you to Dario for sharing your valuable insights. I really do appreciate it. And I think Dario's journey reminds us that leadership is, you know, a blend of innovation and also embracing one's true passions. So thank you to everyone that listened in. Don't forget to like or subscribe or share this episode. And until next time, keep innovating and embracing the exciting possibilities of technology.
Thank you, Paul.
Cheers,
It's been
Dario.
great to be here.
Take care.